It seemed like everyone was screaming for pitching, fans, media. Why weren't you guys more aggressive in terms of adding pitching?
Well, a couple of reasons. Some of the pitchers that we did chase, we just weren't able to get done.
Lies!
And then the other was we really wanted to give some of these guys an opportunity.
Deceptions!
O'Neill and Bader were both more valued than them at the time of those deals, and now things have changed. And you're trying to get it right, you really are. But clearly those look like mistakes.
Every day, more love. Yes, 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 yes. Stip, stibbity dip, stibbity double, 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 double. Yes, 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 yes. Stibbity dop. Yes, 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 yes. Stip, stibbity dip, stibbity double, 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 double. Yes, yes, yes,
yes. This is
yes.
Gateway City Sports.
It's a trap.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I break your concentration?
This is the Team of Rivals podcast.
Everything you want to hear from the big sports to the big screen.
He's all by himself, fires into the end zone. Caught! Touchdown! No! Vaughn into the windup in his first offering. Just a bit outside. He tried the corner and missed.
He doesn't like you. I don't like you either.
Time winding down. Michael for three. Yeah! Yes! She is gone! I can't believe what I just saw. Go crazy, folks! Go crazy! You believe in miracles?
Yes! You may fire when ready.
What?
Good evening, Cubs and Cardinals fans, to the Team of Rivals broadcast. Proud members of the Gateway City Sports Network, where you can find great podcast and blog content. It's Thursday, July 13th, and it's the eve of the sell-off. But before we get into the sell-off, just know that you can follow us on social media at Team of Rivals Pod, or find us online at teamofrivalspodcast.com. And for those of you who prefer to watch the show, we also post every once in a while when we live stream, like now, on YouTube, Facebook, and Rumble. So hit the like and subscribe buttons, and be sure that notifications are on so that you know anytime we post new content. I'm going to jump right into it. Joining me for this week's show, co-founder of TOR, and I think, 125 in the 2022 edition of the Top Cards on Twitter, Ron Nuttall. And Ron, I just have to ask you, and I'm going to put this up as a poll as you answer the question. What is the least surprising bit of news that has hit the wires in the last 24 hours? Is it the official confirmation that the Cardinals will be sellers at the trade deadline, or is it the fact that Elliott didn't show up for tonight's show?
You said least surprising, right?
Correct. Least surprising.
That's pretty easy. It's going to have to be our occasional guy here that it's a softball, dude. That's going to be an overwhelming 100% pull.
You think so?
Yeah, and I think so. Like anybody who's followed us
who
knows it's going to be a runaway. Yeah,
I can't wait to see it. I can't wait, Ron. I know that you had it there when we started the show, but just in case for those who are jumping in late, I know you put a lot of work into it. I actually watched you doing it. Even though you didn't know that I was online here.
I couldn't see it.
Just one more time, because the dipping and dodging out of the St. Louis front office right now is incredibly entertaining. I can see that you're very entertained by it. So why don't you go ahead and replay that remix again?
Sure. My pleasure.
It seemed like everyone was screaming for pitching, fans, media. Why weren't you guys more aggressive in terms of adding pitching?
Well, a couple of reasons. Some of the pitchers that we did chase, we just weren't able to get done.
Lies!
And then the other was we really wanted to give some of these guys an opportunity.
Deceptions!
O'Neill and Bader were both more valued than them at the time of those deals. And, now things have changed. And, you're trying to get it right. You really are. But, clearly those look like mistakes.
Every day, more Yes, 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 yes.
Yes. He may have been telling the truth, but I think it's a funny clip to put together.
Personally, I love it. And in fact, here's the thing. So after dinner, the boy and I went out for dinner or went out for dessert. And I was kind of thinking ahead to the show and what I wanted to talk about. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a little primer, a little something for the Cardinals fans who listen and watch us. Give you guys a little what to expect when you're expecting the trade deadline. Mm-hmm. Just things that you could look forward to from a Cubs fan standpoint. But then I realized that I don't think there are really any Cardinals players who you guys would be terribly heartbroken to hear were traded. Like, a couple of years ago, maybe Adam Wainwright, but he's broken down. I don't know that you're going to get anything for him anyway. I don't know that he's necessarily going anywhere, but at this point, I can't imagine Cardinals fans will be particularly broken up if he goes. I don't think Arenado or Goldschmidt is going anywhere. But I don't know how attached are Cardinals fans to them, considering that they've only had them for a couple of years. I mean, I can't think of anybody on the staff, on their roster, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's nobody I can think of on your roster that, from what I've read and seen and heard over the last several years, that a Cardinals fans can be terribly disappointed to see head out of town.
So your question, is there anybody we'd be terribly disappointed, right? That's your question.
Yeah.
Not what I think.
Yeah.
Which,
anticipating your answer, it shot the entire premise of this show.
Well,
but go ahead.
No, I think a lot of it depends on return. And it depends on if it sets them up in the minds of fans better compete in 2024 and kind of really shake things up. So in that sense, I don't know that there's really any one or two players that, let's say, we'll call it what it is. Like if Arenado was dealt, there'd be some pretty pissed off people. But it ultimately depends on what kind of return we're talking about here. So that's a lot of talent to give up. So you would have to assume you're going to get a fair amount of talent back. But me personally, I don't think he's going to go anywhere. It really, at this point, also, I'd be surprised if Goldschmidt goes anywhere. If what he's saying is truthful, that they want to set things up for 2024. So any deals they make this summer is going to be exactly for that, right? It's going to be for next year and beyond. Do they see those two guys on the corner? And I'm talking about the two big ones, right? Do they see those guys being a part of a winning effort going forward? And I would have to think if you were a GM, you'd say yes, right? Like if your window was farther out, if we were talking like, we're going to do more and this is going to be more like a 2025, 26 possibly thing, then I think there's a possibility where you could see Paul Goldschmidt maybe being dealt, maybe even Arenado, if the window was going to be pushed out farther. But it doesn't sound like they're committing to that. So if they're talking about next year, I think Goldschmidt's still going to be there. And I think our third baseman's still going to be there. Now, Adam Wainwright, they're not going to deal him. I think even if he was pitching well, he's not going to be dealt. They're going to want him to finish off, whatever's left, whatever he might have left available for the rest of the year. I think they're going to want to let him finish in a Cardinals uniform. So I don't think his name will come up. But with that said, I don't think anybody's going to want to deal for him at this point anyway. There's not much left from what we've seen. And he stated this on the longer form that I know I cherry picked a few comments. I probably could have picked some better ones, but I was working up against the clock here. The guys that aren't likely to come back, meaning those that are in a walk year, are probably, I'd say those are the candidates for being dealt. That would be Hicks, Montgomery, Flaherty. I think those guys are probably a pretty safe bet that I think they're going to be dealt. You could even throw a name like Ryan Helsley in there, right? If he comes back and he's healthy before the end of July, if they can get him back at all, I think he's another candidate that, not in a walk year, they still have some control left over him, but he could net you something pretty big. If he comes back to form, there's a lot of teams that are looking for a closer. How many closers get dealt this time of year, right? Guys at the back end of the bullpen, the high leverage guys. And I'd still throw him in as one of those. So I think that's another possibility. And, you can look up and down the roster. I don't think many are safe from this conversation, but I do think that there are people that, again, I premise this by saying if everything he said was true and they're looking at 2024, I think that what you'd call the core group of players are probably still going to be there unless they're overwhelmed with a return. So I think that's what it comes down to. But we can talk about his interview later. But that's my opinion anyway. Regardless of what he said on the interview, I do think that any deals they make now are obviously it's not going to be for this year, and fans need to understand that you're not going to get a big name back for anybody. You're not even going to get a middle tier person back. I don't think at all unless you package a bunch of them together. So it'll be active, but there's not going to be anything I think that would be like, damn, I can't wait till 2024 starts up, because you got an off season. They're going to have to finish the work, I think, in the off season. So are they sellers? They are, but not in the sense that you're gearing up for a rebuild. The other thing that bracing Cardinals fans for is the possibility that not a lot of these guys do get dealt, because what they were going to get in return isn't as valuable as just taking a draft pick choice, right? That could, if they don't get anything back for these guys, or they can't put something together, don't be shocked if, you know what, we're going to take the draft pick compensation because that's the better return than some AA guy, you know? So that's a real fair possibility, because how many guys you're going to deal for now, they're going to set you up for a better chance to win in 2024 that aren't like major league ready right now. And so don't be surprised, folks, if you hear a very quiet trade deadline with the headlines out there that we are going to trade people. It's a possibility that a lot of them won't.
Or, not necessarily that they won't be active at the deadline, but there's the possibility. And, this would definitely be one where I think our experience as Cubs fans, that's why I was looking forward to Elliott being here tonight. Got my hopes up. Our experience as Cubs fans being that sometimes,
you shouldn't do that.
I know.
Yeah,
I know. But that sometimes you have to accept the possibility that you're not going to, you're not necessarily going to get some high profile super stud prospect. That what you may instead have to settle for is a bunch of lottery tickets. And if one of them pays off, that may be worth it. I mean, the Cubs are seeing that right now. When they traded Javi Baez for Pete Crow Armstrong, everybody was like, well, but he's injured.
Yeah.
I mean, he was one of the top prospects in the Mets system, but he was injured, and is he going to be the same player? And he's come back, and he's now the number one prospect in the Cubs system. And I think if he wasn't at the start of the season, when they do the midseason re-rank, he's going to be a top 10 player. But that was one where they had to take a chance. But you look at the opposite end of that schedule, the Cubs got 4 or 5 lottery tickets for Yu Darvish. And I think only one of them has made it to AA at this point. And that was 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
So, you're taking a chance at the deadline.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see, because if they can't swing anything or get anything in return they like, and they do settle for the QO and then the draft pick compensation on the other end of that, then it's going to make the off season, like, I think that just a lot more pressure on their off season, obviously, if they can't make anything work here to gear them up for next year. So they do have to have near major league talent ready, or even get something off a major league roster that it just might be a better fit. I don't know. It's got a lot of work to do, man. And it's Cardinals fans are going to, I know some are going to expect it all to happen this month, and it's just not. There might be a step or two in the right direction this month, but the bulk of the work is, I think, remains. It's going to remain. And they're going to have to, scares me a little bit, but they're going to have to spend. It doesn't scare me that the money spent, it's how they spend it is what I'm worried about. And
spend in the off season, or spend as part of the trade deadline, in that they may have to take on some bad contracts.
I'd rather them do that. They seem to pull off better trades. Okay, exception obviously being the 2 American League All-Stars in the starting lineup and the pitcher Zach Gallen. It didn't take one inning for the Cardinals reference to come out with Arozarena in left and Garcia to the right. They both made like leaping catches in the first inning. Yeah, I did watch a little bit of it. And it didn't take long at all to reference. These guys were, came up together, and they, I think they were born in the same country, teammates when they were young guys, because they were both from Cuba. And then, they were in the Cardinals system together. They grew up there too. And they're like, oh, fuck, that didn't take long. So, those bad trades aside, they've definitely swung better deals as acquiring guys via trade and sign than they have just going out and signing. There's way too many examples now to point where they've spent in free agency, but they spent terribly, right? Like Steven Matz being the latest. Contreras could fall in that category too in time. But, Mike Leake, Brett Cecil, Miller, Andrew Miller, it's quite a compiling list now of just terrible free agent acquisitions. So they'll need to spend. How they spend it's going to be a real big question. And they haven't done it well so far, but they got a ton of work to do. Like if they want to get back to form in 24, and it's going to take more than one trade deadline with a handful of deals to get them there. It's going to be like next 9 months. They're going to have to work at it hard, and they're going to have to get uncomfortable. They're going to have to get aggressive, and now, inevitably, we're talking about all this. I have to go to this interview with him because he did acknowledge that there are problems, and the model they're using, the system they're using, is not working. Whatever that entails, he didn't get into detail. I don't know if that means their internal talent evaluation or their evaluation of other talent, but they did acknowledge they have a big problem. They should have done more to address pitching depth, while still being able to, I guess, give young guys a chance to fill things internally, but they didn't fortify it with enough depth at all. We've seen that for 3 years in a row, where he's having to scramble at the deadline to, pick up aging left-handers. So they're at least acknowledging the problem, but he's become a Michelin 5-star chef in terms of word salad, right? He knows how to do that very well. So I don't know. It's probably the most candid I've heard him, but it's still a heavy, a heavy helping of just Mo being Mo too. So still the most candid interview he's probably given their state, the acknowledgement that fans are frustrated. They're not getting the results they want. They've had some misfires, mistakes with players they've dealt for, players they've signed, and then players they haven't signed and haven't dealt for. So there's at least acknowledgement. But how much will they do? That's all the words. Now we want to see the actions. The actions will probably tell us more.
And it seems like, look, yes, credit where due. He acknowledged that that things haven't been working out and that they've been caught short. But it seems to me that's only because he's back into a corner, and it's obvious.
Well, there's no escaping
because
it now,
his MO, pun intended a little bit, his MO has always been to deny. No, everything's working. This is exactly how we wanted it to go. You can't possibly say that this is how you wanted this season to go. And I think that it does open up a larger, here's the one thing that we don't know. And then I can move on to it. We don't know what we don't know what the Cardinals are like as sellers because they haven't had to do it in so long. Right. Uh-huh. They've either been buyers or they've stood pat, but we've never actually seen how they operate as sellers. So, is he going to be able to fleece people at the poker table the way that he has in acquiring?
He's never had to do it before. That's the thing. The last time I remember, maybe somebody remembers a different time period between now and like 1990. But if you go all the way back in the very late 80s, I think it was 1990, if I remember correctly. That was Terry Pendleton's walk year. They dealt Willie McGee away to the Oakland A's. There was another. Vince Coleman was. He was either dealt or they let him walk too. But that's the last time I remember them kind of tearing things down, or the end of the Whitey era, right? Like where things were dismantled a lot. And the dog is doing sprints in the room behind me. I don't know if you can hear her, but
yeah, I can.
But that's the last time I remember them kind of ripping some things apart and changing things. All right. I lost my train of thought, but it's not in my recent, I call it 3 decades memory here. I don't remember a time that they were just selling. I don't, they've only been the type to make the deal, to try to acquire something. Sometimes it's been very minimal. Sometimes it's been rather significant, like a trade for Matt Holliday, for instance, or Mark McGwire. Those are the kinds of things that I'm more used to on this side. I'm not used to this, So I don't know, man. It's a little nerve wracking because I can't really off the top of my head call like what are the most recent great moves that they've made other than Arenado. I think it's kind of stopped there, and then there were some misfires before that. Goldschmidt ended up being a good deal, so they can do those things very well. Now selling off, I haven't seen them do it. They got a lot of case studies. If I were them, I'd see if I could just hire the Tampa Bay, whoever's working best over there in that Tampa Bay front office. I'd probably throw a, Brinks truck at them, see if you can get them over there, because they seem to be a hell of a lot better at this kind of thing than the Cardinals have been recently.
So then that opens up the obvious question. That's kind of where I wanted to go there is, December. Is Ollie Marmol still the hell? In September, is Ollie Marmol still the manager of the Cardinals? And I think probably far more importantly, are Mozeliak and Gers still in the front office, or does Bill DeWitt say, hey, you know what, fellas, you've had your time and this has not worked?
No, DeWitt's already come out and answered that question. He said he trusts Mo, he trusts his track record, and he signed him to a 2-year extension this, like right before spring training or during, and he intends for him to fulfill it. So we're going to have him through 24 and 25. That's going to be the guy. He's not going to go anywhere. Your question about Marmol, I don't think they're going to make a change there. But ultimately, I think it depends on what they do at this deadline, what they do in the offseason, and do they still see Ollie as being the right person to lead them, lead this change from the coaching staff, right? Like, is that still going to work? And I think, Pete, that I think they'd be in a bad position to change managers at this point. Because you think about it, who of quality is going to want to step in there given the condition they're in right now? Who's going to want to take that job that you really want to take that job? Say it's from the outside. Who's going to want to step in and do? Now it's a major league job, right? There's going to be guys that want it, of course. But are you going to get the person you really need right now? Or are you better off sticking to the guy that you wanted there in the first place? Acknowledging that you built a shitty roster for him to deal with. Not to say he's done a great job, but he's using the cards he was dealt, right? Pun intended. I feel that they're going to stick with that. I think they'll stick with that. So I don't think Mo's not going anywhere. I think the owners made that very clear. And if Mo is safe, I have to think right now that Ollie's probably safe too.
Well, and here's what, obviously I'm not a Cardinals fan, but my retort to Bill DeWitt would be, what has changed from last year to this year? You largely have the same roster. I mean, yes, Pujols is retired and Molina has retired. But other than that, this roster is largely unchanged. And look at what happened. And yet you're going to continue with the same leadership that put you in this situation. How can you justify this?
Yeah, it's even more mystifying when you think that this is the guy that said the Cardinals won game over 500 when they fired Mike Matheny. Said that this is the kind of performance that's unacceptable, for the Cardinals organization, to their fans and everything else. So now you've been 10 to 14 games under 500 now for like almost 2 months. Is it acceptable now? And it wasn't in 2018, and it wasn't when Mike Schilt had his philosophical differences with you after they won the division in 2019 and went to the NLCS. Like, all of that stuff is unacceptable, but right now it's okay. Like, yeah, it is hard to believe, but I have to believe him when he comes out and tells us that he intends for Mozeliak to finish his commitment to fulfill his extension. I don't think he's not going to go anywhere. As much as I don't like it, because I think a change is needed to the culture. I don't see that happening. So the only thing that we can sit back and like realistically hope for is that Mo and his entire staff do recognize that they've had the issue, that they've done their best to troubleshoot and correct and find a solution to the problems that they've had. that's the only thing we can hope for, because we're not going to get a change in the front office for a couple of years.
Ron, when do you think this shift, this organizational philosophy shift, came to the Cardinals to where winning the division was enough?
Yeah.
Because clearly that, I mean, the more you look at it, especially from an outsider, I know you Cardinals fans have talked about it for a while.
Yeah.
But obviously with more of a focus on it now, given what we do, I've definitely noticed it. It doesn't seem like being competitive for the World Series is the goal. It seems like winning the division is the goal. And then whatever else happens in the playoffs,
just be good enough to get in, right? Take your chances once you get in, right? Like that's
right.
Well, here's the good and bad, right? The great thing about 2006 was they won the World Series, but they were not a good team that year. They were an 83 win team. Yeah, they were riddled with injuries all year, and all of a sudden everybody got healthy right at the right time. They got hot. Same thing kind of happened in 2011. That wasn't a fantastic team that year. They were a wild card team. They captured the last wild card spot on the last day of the year. So they just got in, right? But then they won it. So now the difference is those are teams with Chris Carpenter and Albert Pujols and Yachty, when he was still in his prime. And, you could argue you maybe don't have guys quite like that, but you've got some pretty damn good ones, right? So I think when they committed in the early last decade that they were going to, and I think for the right reasons, it made sense. They were they were ahead of a lot of people in terms of, we are going to draft extremely well. We're going to develop a department and use the analytical tools and everything else we're going to get out ahead of this, right? Because we can't sustain by trading for big names year over year or every 2 or 3 years. Like, we just can't sustain that because we'll have nothing left in our system. And by the time Jocketty did leave, or was shown the door at the end of 2007, their system wasn't in great shape. Once they committed to that model that they're going to draft well, develop, and they're going to try to fill things from within and supplement as needed, I think they committed to that, Pete. And when they committed to that, we did start to see, I think in 2015 is when, the last era was kind of almost over for them. All those players, the core that was, still from, I guess, the end of the Jocketty era, that, most of them were gone except, a couple big names. But when they kind of flipped this model over, you did see a steady decline since 2015, where, you weren't talking about them as like top 3 or 4 true World Series contenders anymore at that point. They were like, they're probably going to win their shitty division, or at least compete for it. Or at a minimum, you think the Cardinals are getting the wild card, right? And I think that's just, somehow that's become the norm. Other people might have different theories, but I think when they committed to doing things the way that they've done them, I think that's when the standard has slipped.
All right. So we've kind of gone through how nobody will hurt. So put on your GM's hat, and let's assume that I'm not asking for returns, but just who do you think on August 2nd, since the trade deadline this year is August 1st, on August 2nd, who's no longer on the Cardinals roster?
I'd start with Jordan Montgomery, Jack Flaherty. They're both in walk years. I don't think that they anticipate, like, they'd want one or both of those guys back, but I don't think they anticipate it. So I do think it's a high likelihood that those two are gone. I think Jordan Hicks will be dealt. If Tyler O'Neill can work his way back and play a little bit, I think he could. I think he's one that could be dealt too. Those are probably my leading 4 candidates. I'd throw perhaps Paul DeJong as a 5th. There's a handful of other players. I know that Brendan Donovan's name will likely come up. Not necessarily that the Cardinals want to deal him, because I think they probably see him. They like those guys that can play multiple positions, and they're valuable, and they're pretty good players. But I could see them maybe being squeezed a bit to make that deal that they really like, that he could be a name that's thrown in there to kind of make the deal a little more rich, the return. And beyond that, I don't know that you can get, I just don't know. Helsley, I think that's another one too. Outside shot, but I think Ryan Helsley could be another one that's dealt. So I think those are probably the candidates I think are most likely. The rest will come with some minor league names we may or may not know, but I think nobody that's going to make anybody scream. But I think those are probably the names we're going to hear.
Okay, and two-part question for you.
Mm-hmm.
If the Cardinals could, I'm not saying that they will, because I know you absolutely don't think this is happening, although it's fun to throw it out there.
Uh-huh.
If the Cardinals could put together a package for Shohei Ohtani, okay?
Yeah,
You could bring Ohtani in,
Yeah.
you get to pitch him on extending to St. Louis, right? It knocks out, it takes care of two holes. You get a power hitting outfielder, you get a DH, actually takes care of three, right? You get a power hitting outfielder, you get a DH, you get a front of the line, not just front of the line starting pitcher, you get an ace.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you do it if the names attached to it were names like Mason Wynn? If it was Matthew Liberatore, if it was your top prospects, would you pull the trigger on that trade?
I don't do it. No, I don't. And not necessarily because of the prospects. I mean, it has something to do with the prospects you mentioned. But by the way, it's probably going to take a few more than that. You might even have a Jordan Walker or Nolan Gorman thrown in there too, right?
Those are like the top line. Those are the names that I always see Cardinals fans drooling over.
Yeah.
And so,
well, Cardinals fans are dumb. And you're not going to give away players like that for 2 months, even 2 months of guaranteed return, even for a player like Ohtani. I mean, it would generate a lot of buzz. That stadium would be packed the rest of the year, right, for every home game. But no, I don't do it for a 2-month rental because I don't believe there's a chance in hell that even if you got him via trade, that you're going to end up securing him for $50-55 million a year. I know he's a multiple position player, right? He's a pitcher and a position player, or a bat at least, right? Yes, and you could say, gosh, a pitcher like him, would you give him $30 million a year? Yeah, I think a lot of people would. Would you give that bat and all that potential offensively? Would you give that 25 or 30 million as well? There you go. You got two players that you would pay $25+ million to. So in that sense, yes, but I think that's too big of a number for St. Louis when you combine it for one guy. I don't see that as a destination for him. I don't know why he would want to go to the Midwest. I don't know why he would want to go there, even if we got him in there for 2 months. I think it's such a long shot to retain a player like that when there's such appeal from the big markets that they're all going to be checking in at a minimum. A lot of the big markets will be making a serious push for him, and I don't think St. Louis wins those battles. They just don't. So I don't give up too much of my future to secure a guy for a guaranteed 2 months, and that's it, because I think that's all they're going to get. So no, I don't make that deal.
All right. So
sorry, I know I piss a lot of them off, but
well, that's why I asked the question, is so that you would. So we moved north, and it was confirmed right before we jumped on, actually, by John Heyman, that the Cubs are in a holding pattern right now. That they haven't determined whether they're going to be buyers or sellers because they went into the All-Star break on a little bit of a heater, and they have a soft schedule coming up. They've got, I think it's 10 games in 12 days in Chicago, and then they go on the road to St. Louis. Before finally having a challenging series right before the end of the month. So, they're facing the National. The challenging series is against the Reds. So if every game that they win in that Reds series is ground that they make up on the top of the division, and really ultimately for any team in the NL Central, the road to the playoffs is a division title, and that's it. There's no wild card coming out of the Central, so it's win or bust. So I don't think that we're going to have a good idea on where the Cubs stand even this time next week.
No,
unless they go on a tremendous run here starting tomorrow and they win 7 in a row.
Yeah, is there one or two moves that they can make that are going to make all the difference in the world and rocket them to the top of the division? I'd say probably not. It's probably time. A little more time that they need. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't hear much from Chicago. If they're in a holding pattern right now, mid-July, it's going to take something probably really convincing over the next week or so. Yeah, maybe they do a little bit of both. Sell a guy or two, buy a guy or two.
I could see that.
Yeah.
I could see that. There's been talk about it, and I think that this would be a smart move is to jump right now and get Jamer Candelario from the Nationals. He's easily having his best season of his career. The Cubs have a hole at third base, and he can also play first base. So you jump on him and see where things go over the next couple of weeks. And, if it turns out that they're going nowhere, well, then flip him. Mm-hmm. Right. So you send out a couple of prospects, maybe you can get a couple back that equal the value that you shipped out and, roll the dice. I don't think that they can wait until the last minute to make a buy or sell decision. I think that they need to start now with what they can move on to try and push things in one direction. So loads of fun, but not a lot to talk about in Chicago right now.
No,
but
it is.
Man, oh man.
It's a little on the quiet side. The Cardinals are making all the noise this year in all the wrong ways. So I guess the content hasn't been very thin. It's actually better when they're not playing and they do an interview like that. It gives you more to think about, more to talk to. But we'll see who shows up after the All-Star break. They've had about 5 days off. The only one that saw action was Nolan Arenado in the All-Star game. Everybody else had a break. So I guess now we just kind of wait and see what kind of Cardinals team shows up now, and especially for those players that are likely to get dealt. That'll be another interesting thing to watch. Are we going to see, Jack's last start coming up here and over the next couple of weeks? Or, Montgomery, I think it's a given. They had him for a nice little year. He pitched pretty well, but I think he's gone too. So always fun to watch, right? I think when things are going to happen and you kind of know who the rumors are attached to and see how they perform. Are they feeling that pressure? Are they showcasing themselves? I guess walk years, everybody is showcasing themselves, I guess, in their own head, but it won't be as boring as the first half. I think we'll get a little bit better team with the second half, but they've dug themselves such a hole that I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. We'll see them finish a half dozen to 8 games under 500 probably by the end of the year. So they'll be a little bit better with a little bit of treading water. That's what we have to look forward to. I either said something so profound that Pete can no longer talk, or I think he's frozen. He just texted me. So Pete is frozen. So I don't know how much of that. No, you did, my friend. I'm going to leave it right here on him because I know he would appreciate that. That's Pete. So he's either deep in thought or he has you froze. So while Pete fixes things on his end, I think he'll likely just log out, log back in. That's the price we pay for living 4 states apart, 3 states apart. We usually have better luck with the internet than this, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen tonight. So not to steal his thunder, but I think I'll go ahead and walk us out of here. So if you enjoyed watching this live tonight, you can find us just about anywhere that you download a podcast. You can check us out at teamarrivalspodcast.com. You can check us out at gatewaycitysports.com. He's going to try to log out and back on. So I don't know if I should give him a minute to do this exit because I don't really like doing it, but I'm going to keep going. You can find us on Twitter you can find us on all the socials. He's changed that now. It makes it easier for everybody. You can find us on all the socials at teamarivalspod.com. Check out our other podcasts. We have at Gateway City Sports, we have the Derek King Show, 2 for 3 with Moose Michaels. That's a winter podcast. Derek King Sports Show should make its way back in some way, shape, or form here soon, but check out all those great shows. We got Don Glenn's Talking Sports on the Bleachers. He covers all kinds of topics there, everything, and plus he writes a lot for the site too. So check us out at gatewaycitysports.com. And while Pete's working his way back on, you can find me at TOR_Ron75. You can find Elliott at TOR_Elliott. Pete, you cannot find on Twitter, but you can find him at Team Arrivals Pod. He posts on that, I think, more than we do. So you can find us on same location on Facebook and Instagram. All right. Well, I think he's going to try to come back in. So maybe I should let him do this. We get a second version of Pete in. All right, Pete. The only picture I can show of you is frozen, I think. Let me see if. Yeah, you're still frozen. Here, look. You want to see yourself?
Nice. Hey, that's good. It's a good thing that I wasn't looking at the camera at that exact moment.
Yeah. Or like in the middle of the word, eyes half shut, looking drunk.
You mean kind of like the very first red, blue, and green logo that you put up?
Yeah, something like that. I just did our exit. I'm not very good at it, and I don't have it memorized. So if you want to take us all out again, I think we can do that now.
No, I don't. I trust that you did an outstanding job, and we can call it a week, and we'll get back together next week to discuss any developments on the trade deadline.
All right. I'm betting.
Maybe Elliott will be here.
Yeah, we had some good stuff we could have covered tonight, but whatever. All right. Well, I guess I'll take.
And you know what? Speaking of good stuff that we'll one day cover, let's tease it out there again, just so that people don't forget. We have a video, and based on the date line on that video, I do believe that it may have been the actual video of Elliott's state championship wrestling match. So one of these days, when we can get him online, we just for everybody to look forward to. We're going to live stream that. It's only like a 15-minute video. It's not very long, so the three of us can jump on. And it's currently a private YouTube link. So, Ron, you'll be able to pull it up and you'll be able to share it out, and then we can talk over it. And then eventually we can, assuming Elliott's okay with it, we can make that private link public so that everybody can enjoy Elliott's championship.
That'll be fun.
I think so.
All right, we'll keep it clean.
Definitely think so.
Maybe.
We will. Maybe.
All right. That's it for this week. We'll be back next week. 2 of us for sure. Maybe 3. We'll find out last minute. But until then, we love you all so much. We'll see you soon, everybody. Bye-bye.